So we're going to move hazardous materials from point A to point B. Sounds simple, right? But transporting these materials can actually lead to the greatest security risks that you're going to encounter. For example, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or the FMCSA, offers guidance and training for one big risk when transporting hazardous materials. What is it? Cargo tank truck rollovers. As the FMCSA notes, 78% of rollovers involve driver error. In other words, a lot of issues with hazardous material transport safety begin and end with good policy on behalf of the people who are handling those materials. That's why the government actually mandates that when you're transporting hazmat stuff, you come up with a hazardous materials security plan. This has to be in writing and include a risk assessment and measures that are being taken to address those risks. So when do you need a plan like that one? Well, specifically, there are going to be 16 triggers that are going to require a shipper or carrier to implement one of these. So let's look at these triggers in 3 distinct categories. First, any quantity of high hazard materials. Second, large or bulk quantities of hazardous materials. And third, quantities that are shipped that require placarding. In the first category, we have the highest risk materials. In these cases, transporting any quantity of the following materials is going to trigger the need for a detailed hazardous materials security plan. Class 1 explosives, which, per the Code of Federal Regulations, include divisions 1.1, 0.2, and 0.3. These involve explosives with a mass explosion hazard, in which an explosion is going to affect pretty much the entire load instantaneously. Then you've also got poison by inhalation, or PIH materials. Then you've also got organic peroxides type B, which can include liquid or solid and temperature-controlled substances, Centers for Disease Control or Department of Ag-related agents or toxins, and also you have radioactive materials if they're in high enough quantities or concentrations based on the highway route regulations. Now notice that for particularly hazardous substances like Div 1.1 explosives or certain inhalation poisons, for instance, this refers to any quantity. So for example, even a small amount of a Class 1 explosive is going to require a security plan be in place for transporting those materials, even if the risk of explosion seems small. Typically, that category includes any materials that can cause mass damage in even small amounts, greatly increasing the security risk. The next category is large bulk quantities. These are typically defined as more than 3,000 kilograms for solids or 3,000 liters for liquids and gases in a single passage, like a cargo tank in a motor vehicle. It's going to apply to flammable gases, non-flammable gases with an oxidizer subsidiary hazard, flammable liquids packing groups 1 or 2, which is classified by the Federal Aviation Administration as great or medium danger, spontaneously combustible materials in packing groups 1 or 2, oxidizers in packing groups 1 or 2, also perchlorates and some ammonium nitrate compounds. Then we have poisons that are other than PIH, poison by inhalation hazards. And finally, corrosives in packing group 1. So maybe you notice that these substances are also dangerous, but they can be transported in greater quantities because they're more easy to contain and secure even in their bulk amounts. This doesn't mean that you should let up onto your security assessment. Finally, we have the third group of triggers. These are those substances that are shipped in quantities that require placarding. For further guidance on hazardous materials placarding requirements, you can of course consult the U.S. Department of Transportation. Explosives in Division 1.4, 0.5, and 0.6 per the code are defined as having a minor explosion hazard, in the case of Division 1.4, and lower risks than the explosives that we listed earlier on. Desensitized explosives, including Division 4.1 or Class 3 per the Federal Code, dangerous when wet materials, and uranium hexafluoride. Once again, I really want you to keep in mind that even though these bulk quantity materials may seem less of a security risk than the any amounts materials, just having these materials that require placarding for transport is going to be one of those triggers that says you need a security plan. So think about it. Do your hazmat security plans have to address all of your hazmat shipments? Well, not necessarily, but you are going to need a security plan to cover any shipments that meet the triggers we just talked about. Later on, how about we get into greater detail about what your security plan needs to cover?